LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 2nd edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 11 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source will be last night's Saturday Night Live. I'll start off giving you some excerpts from the cold open, Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump, the return of Alec Baldwin, finally. There were a couple good jokes in there. I think I have at least two good jokes, and I'll talk about that after I show the clip. The main topic I'm covering is Trump colluded, ? Because of the big news this week. Well, there was the Manafort news that I'll discuss briefly and will be in some of the clips, but also the big news about Michael Cohen pleading guilty to lying to Congress about when the Trump Tower deal in Moscow ended. And this, even if it's not criminal collusion, is a kind of collusion and creates Russian leverage over Donald Trump, as I'll discuss when I get to the news clips. But I thought, like I said, that there were some good jokes at Saturday Night Live. I'm going to first show the cold open with Alec Baldwin. Then I'll show a couple of the jokes from the Weekend Update. And I'll discuss both of those with you. First, like I said, I'm going to start with the Alec Baldwin in Argentina at the G20. I showed the beginning where he makes a joke about his problems with the European leaders. That was probably the best joke of the whole thing. And then there's Ben Stiller as Michael Cohen, and then Bennett as Vladimir Putin, all coming to an Argentina finale that I will talk about with you after we watch those 2 minutes together over here.
I just can't stop thinking about this Mueller investigation. Sometimes it almost feels like he's coming after me.
Oh, cheer up, Donald. You know, worst case scenario, you go to prison and have to transfer your money to me for safekeeping, and I have to hire a jacked hunk to protect me. I mean, that's worst case. In fact, I'm gonna go think about that worst case while I soak in the bathtub.
All right, I'll be in soon, honey. Oh, Donnie, you've really done it this time. Because I got to face all those European leaders again. They just hate me because I'm a nationalist. I mean, what did nationalism ever do to Europe?
I'm sorry, Mr. Trump. It's over.
Well, Michael, at least there are some things they can never take away from us. Our late-night talks.
They got him on tape.
Our vacations to Moscow.
They seized the records.
What about our hairstylist, the blind one with the shaky hands?
He died like months ago.
I'm sad you're going to prison, Michael. You were like a son to me.
Then why'd you make me do so much illegal stuff?
That's because you were like a son to me. Goodbye, Michael.
Anyway, you won't see me for a while, Donnie. I prefer presidents who don't get indicted.
Come on, I'll buy you a llama and we'll get you drunk.
Oh, you're so actually rich. I love you. Peace out.
Wow, who knows what tomorrow will bring. But for now, I guess all I can say is, don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is I'm very guilty. Some little no-nos and maybe treason. But I kept my promise. Oops, no, I didn't. Don't cry for us, Argentina.
And I won't go into the big finale there. Like I said, I took some excerpts there. You can see the whole video at a link down in the video description. In fact, the source of all my clips are at a link down in the video description, and then most of my clips come from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. I forgot to say that at the beginning. If you want to follow along with my clip list of my 11 clips, this is my sort of cryptic notes. There's a link to that down in the video description. But I actually, every time I watch that, it gets better. I read this Slate article that said, Saturday Night Live isn't funny, which is kind of true a lot of the time, and that there are only two good jokes in there, and one was that joke at the beginning I liked, what problem has Europe ever had with nationalism? But I think the other one was it the Don't Cry for Me, Argentina? That wasn't a bad joke, but also I prefer presidents who weren't indicted, and there were a couple other good jokes. I like the Michael Cohen repartee there with Donald Trump about all the things that Mueller has, and there was a good joke there too about you treat me like a son, but you have me do all this illegal stuff. I'm treating you like a son. And see, there were many good jokes in there, and I don't know why that Slate article said that, but maybe I didn't have a chance to put a link to the Slate article for the live show, but I will put that for the recorded show, and you can compare my analysis, my fair use media analysis of the excerpts I took from the Saturday Night Live cold open with what the Slate article, the writer of that Slate article thought. But before I get to the actual news clips, there wasn't much in the way of news summaries because there was a lot of coverage of the death of George H.W. Bush, which I'm not really going to be covering that at all. I'm covering the topic of the breaking news on Trump collusion this week, which is an ongoing story I've been covering the last couple weeks. And I think is going to be building and building maybe through December. Some people think it's going to be like really breaking and building in December from the punditry talking in clips I'm not taking. And then I saw one person saying, I think it was Chuck Todd saying, well, this is probably going to go all the way through July 4th, and then it's going to get caught up in the 2020 presidential election. And, there'll be all these calls for, Congress not dealing with it, let the voters deal with it. And I don't know, maybe that's true, but I don't know when the news is going to break, but it looks like Mueller's got a lot of stuff, and it could all break in December for all we know. The thing is, because of the death of George H.W. Bush, there weren't a lot of news summaries. I'm going to show you some really brief news summaries from the big five corporate outlets. In fact, one of the best news summaries was from Weekend Update. They covered more at length some of the breaking news than the the big five corporate outlet Sunday news analysis shows did. Fox News Sunday never said the name Michael Cohen in the entire show, and I'll show you the bogus way they even brought up the issue when I get to the Fox News Sunday clip. But here's the Weekend Update clip that sort of summarized the news in a satirical way, I guess, in a way I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Americans were hit with the stunning revelation that their president may have possibly lied to them. Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who I believe is the love child of Celino and Barnes, testified in court that Donald Trump continued to work on a deal to build a Trump Tower in Moscow well into his presidential campaign. Trump defended himself, saying the deal was, quote, very legal and very cool. Which sounds like a Craigslist ad for Russian prostitutes. #1 all-time babes is very legal and very cool, man. And we never kill you, only sometimes.
President Trump attacked Michael Cohen for pleading guilty to lying to Congress, calling him a weak person. Oh, really? What gave that away? His chin? Doesn't Donald Trump realize everyone he hires just ends up leaving him or getting fired or locked up? Oh, honey, it's you. He picks counsel like my cousin Tasha picks baby fathers. This week it was reported that Julian Assange, who dyes his face to match his hair, met with Paul Manafort in 2016. Manafort denies the meeting ever took place, but I don't know if I trust a guy who looks like he bleeds cologne. Manafort looks like the kind of guy that tells his daughter's friend, "You really filled out nicely."
So there were some sort of good jokes there, both about the Cohen plea and then about the WikiLeaks connection to Paul Manafort, which, like I said, the withdrawal of the plea deal with Manafort was real news this week. That last story, though, was a Guardian story that said that Manafort met with Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, and that ended up kind of blowing up as like a fake news story or like a poorly sourced story. And from what I understand, it seems more likely than not that is a not true story. And so I don't know exactly how it got into Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update coverage, but I guess they don't have the journalistic standards or whatever. Do you think that's something that should be allowed to seep into the zeitgeist when it's fake news? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And other than that, though, like I said, that was sort of more of a news summary of what happened than you got on the other shows, because all the shows spent the majority of the shows, I would say, on the death of George H.W. Bush, and I guess that's a big news story for the next several days. But this, so that was the the only real introduction to what happened this week on NBC's Meet the Press, where I usually have like a 3 or 4 minute news summary, was this 46-second introductory clip that Chuck Todd ran before his interview that I'll show a little bit later with Jerry Nadler, who's going to be the incoming Democratic chair of the House Judiciary Committee, so responsible for impeachment. This is only 46 seconds long. You can compare it to what they did on Saturday Night Live. Which one gives you more information? You can let me know what you think after we watch this Meet the Press clip together over here.
Turning now to the Russia investigation and the big bombshell of the week, Michael Cohen's admission that President Trump's involvement in his Moscow Tower project was deeper and lasted much longer than Cohen had testified to Congress about. The guilty plea by President Trump's former lawyer could help us understand some of what we saw in 2016. It could explain why Mr. Trump early on had incentive to embrace Vladimir Putin during the campaign. It could explain why Mr. Trump called for giving Putin relief from sanctions over his annexation of Crimea from Ukraine. And it could explain why the Republican platform was stripped of a proposal to give lethal aid to Ukraine. What it certainly does is place President Trump closer to the center of the investigation of his campaign's ties to Russia. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Jerrold Nadler, who will lead the Judiciary Committee in the next Congress.
So I'll have a Jerry Nadler clip a little bit later, but I just wanted to show that news summary. That was basically the longest news summary of what happened in the Mueller investigation this last week. I guess in some ways, Donald Trump, in terms of his collusion and obstruction of justice charges, was lucky that George H.W. Bush died this week because it covered a major development in the Mueller investigation. But it did get some coverage, like I said, everywhere but Fox News Sunday. That was the news summary before the Jerry Nadler interview, not as big as the introductory news summary. And here, the next clip I'm going to show is Adam Schiff being interviewed by George Stephanopoulos. It starts with a news summary about the Cohen guilty plea, and then I edit part out where Adam Schiff is responding to what Roger Stone said this morning on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. That is the second to last clip I'm going to show you, almost 5.5 minute clip of all the, I have to call it, all the bullshit. In fact, that's actually what Roger Stone says he's guilty. Unless bullshit is illegal, he's not guilty of a crime. You'll see in the introductory clip to that 5.5 minutes. So later, and then the last clip I will show will be Adam Schiff responding to what Roger Stone said. That's edited out of this next clip, which instead is the very brief ABC News summary of the Michael Cohen plea, followed by what Adam Schiff says are the implications of that plea. And he has like a few different implications that I will discuss with you after we watch this almost 4.5 minute clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos together from this morning over here.
Good morning. We are coming on the air now with major breaking news in the Russia investigation. Michael Cohen, President Trump's former attorney, longtime fixer, has reached a new plea deal with special counsel Robert Mueller. He is appearing in federal court in Manhattan at any moment, expected to plead guilty for false statements to Congress after dozens of hours of testimony to Mueller's team centered on the key issues of collusion with Russia and obstruction of justice by President Trump. That was the scene on Thursday morning. The latest move by special counsel Robert Mueller. We're going to talk about it now with Congressman Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us again this morning. I want to get to the implications of that Cohen plea deal. Of course, it was Michael Cohen who pled guilty this week to false statements to Congress. That admission, he lied about working on the Trump Tower in Moscow to protect President Trump. What does that tell you? What does that agreement and what you've learned about it tell you about Mueller's core areas of focus, collusion with Russia, possible obstruction of justice by President Trump?
Well, it tells me a couple things. It tells me that he wanted to lock in Michael Cohen. There was no reason for that plea, for that additional count. It's not going to materially affect his sentence, but it does have the benefit of making sure that nothing changes down the road, that there's no pardon that causes this witness to go south. I think the likelihood of that was very remote, but nonetheless, as a prosecutor, you don't like to take chances. It also tells me that he wanted to put all this on the record. He wanted this out in the public domain. And that raises a concern for me. Why does Bob Mueller feel it necessary to do that? Is it that he fears that Mr. Whitaker will shut him down or prevent him from telling the country what happened? So that's some of the, I think, the procedural significance. But the very broad significance here, George, is that there is now testimony, there is now a witness who confirms that in the same way Michael Flynn was compromised, that the president and his business are compromised. And that is the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was compromised because he was saying things publicly that were not true about discussions with the Russians over sanctions. And now we have Michael Cohen saying that what the president was saying, what Michael Cohen was saying and others were saying about when this business deal ended was not true. And what's more, the Russians knew it wasn't true. That at the same time that Donald Trump was the presumptive nominee of the GOP and arguing in favor of doing away with sanctions, he was working on a deal that would require doing away with sanctions for him to make money in Russia. That is a real problem. It means that the compromise is far broader than we thought.
You saw what the president had to say. He said, first of all, that he thinks Michael Cohen is lying, but then he had a backup argument as well, basically saying that there would be nothing wrong if I were pursuing this tower. Here's what he said on Thursday.
I was running my business while I was campaigning. There was a good chance that I wouldn't have won, in which case I would have gotten back into the business. And why should I lose lots of opportunities?
As he also put in a tweet, this was very legal and very cool. Your response?
Well, whether it was legal or not remains to be seen. It certainly wasn't very cool. More than that, it was very compromising of our country. In order for this Trump Tower deal to go through, sanctions had to be lifted on a Russian state bank. At the same time, Donald Trump is out there pushing to lift sanctions on Russia and this bank. There's no way to describe that as cool or ethical or in the national interest. It means that the president, whether he won or lost, was hoping to make money from Russia, was seeking at the same time to enlist the support of the Kremlin to make that money. And what's more, when this came to light, the Kremlin intervened. Mr. Peskov, the spokesman for the Kremlin, intervened to help Donald Trump and his business in the cover-up. That is so deeply compromising. And we have to remember what the Mueller investigation began as the Comey investigation was a counterintelligence investigation. That is an investigation into whether Donald Trump and his organization were compromised. And now, via Michael Cohen, we find out that, yes, there was compromise, and that puts our country at risk.
Based on what we've learned from Cohen's plea deal so far, do you think others in Trump's orbit lied to Congress about this as well? For example, the president's son, Don Jr.?
And if you want to see Adam Schiff's answer to that question, you have to watch This Week with George Stephanopoulos yourself, or there are excerpts of it. There's a link down in the video description to the source of all the clips I'm showing to you, so you can check that out. But I left that little last bit in there to... actually, Adam Schiff, I'll spoiler what he says. Spoiler alert, what he says is, we don't know, we're going to let Robert Mueller decide, but the important thing is the House Intelligence Committee that Adam Schiff is about to take over, Devin Nunes would not send those transcripts to Robert Mueller. Michael Cohen pled guilty to lying to Congress for his testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is Richard Burr is the chair, and the ranking Democrat is Mark Warner. The next two clips I have are from Senator Mark Warner. But now that Adam Schiff is taking over the House Intelligence Committee, one of the things he says that's important in the answer to that question that I'm not showing you is that now that he's taking over, he's going to send all those transcripts to Robert Mueller and let Robert Mueller decide if people just forgot or whether they were intentionally lying about a material fact, which is what you have to do in order to be guilty of lying to Congress. It's not just you say something that's not true. You have to intentionally do it. It has to be about something that's relevant. That's a material fact. So there are all sorts of elements to it. And Adam Schiff says that's something Robert Mueller should figure out. Now, like I said, the transcripts that were sent over to Robert Mueller came from Senator Mark Warner's committee. He's still the ranking member because the Republicans kept the Senate. But he was on two different shows, CNN's State of the Union and then CBS's Face the Nation. Like I said, neither of them really had news summaries, but they both dealt with the Michael Cohen plea. And unlike Fox News Sunday, which is a clip I'll show a little bit later, where they never even said the name Michael Cohen, and the question that Chris Wallace asked about the Mueller investigation was like so bias towards Trump TV. You won't even, it was whatever. I'll get to that in a moment. But one thing that Adam Schiff sort of intimated was that Russia was involved in the cover-up with Trump, the cover-up of this deal that Putin's second in command was involved in this cover-up. And one of the things Mark Warner makes clear in both of these next two clips is that really gave Russia leverage over Trump. I was talking about that at the beginning of the show, because they know, even if Trump lying to the American people about, I have no business ties with Russia while he's trying to get this Trump Tower deal, even if that's not illegal, he's lying to the American people, and the Russians know it, so they have compromat. That in itself is compromising material, because they can release that anytime they want. And that comes up in both these next two clips. The first one is CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper gives a little bit of a news introduction. This is like the closest State of the Union did to a news summary of what happened with the Cohen plea this week. And what I like about this, I've actually edited two parts of the Mark Warner interview together, is in the first part, Mark Warner lays out all the evidence of collusion, and there is a lot of evidence of collusion. That's why I titled this video Trump Colluded ? Because the evidence is building up, and he lays it out. But then later, when Jake Tapper asks him, have you come to any conclusions about collusion? He says, well, I'm waiting. He's trying to show how he doesn't go through the evidence again. He says and that's what Jake Tapper asks him, is there any evidence of collusion? And he instead says, well, I'm not drawing collusion conclusions, which I will discuss with you after we watch that CNN State of the Union clip from this morning together over here.
The pressure over the Mueller investigation ratchets up. Now we know the president's former attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, told Mueller he lied about a potential business deal with Russia to protect his boss, who was also out there not telling the truth about it. Joining me now, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He's the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. So Michael Cohen says in this court filing on Friday that he, quote, remained in close and regular contact with the White House staff when he was lying to Congress about the development and attempted development of a Trump Tower in Moscow. Did President Trump or the White House staff know that he was lying, instruct him to lie? Do we know anything about that?
Well, first of all, Jake, in light of the earlier segment in the news of the last few days, want to add my voice in terms of a great deal of respect and admiration for President Bush. And boy, oh boy, that kind of strong leadership he brought to the world stage. We could use that now. Could you imagine a George Bush at this last G20 versus the performance of Mr. Trump? To the Mueller investigation and what happened last week with the Cohen pleading, let's step back and look at what we know. We know that now that then candidate Donald Trump was still trying to do business with Russia in the summer of 2016. We know as well that his son and son-in-law had been meeting with Russians to get potential dirt on Hillary Clinton. We know that his campaign aides knew about the emails that had been stolen by the Russians. And we knew that his campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was trying to offer to brief the Russians. And
when you say the campaign aides knew about, you're talking about...
I'm talking about Papadopoulos.
Papadopoulos, okay.
Papadopoulos. So these are all things that have been established by Mueller. And what I find particularly interesting with the revelation of Cohen's plea is that he's saying he lied to protect then-candidate Trump's stories that he had nothing to do with Russia. So the president seems to already be changing his story a little bit and saying, well, it was all legal. I'll leave lawyers to make those determinations. But I got to believe that most Republicans who were about to nominate Donald Trump in the summer of 2016 would probably have thought it was a relevant fact. They would like to have known that then-candidate Trump was still trying to do business with Russia.
Do we know whether or not, we know Michael Cohen said that he was in contact, close and regular contact with White House staff while he was lying to Congress about this deal, the Trump Tower in Moscow. Do we know anything about whether or not the White House was aware that he was lying?
I'm not aware of that. Obviously, this was just the plea arrangement with Michael Cohen, and clearly most of these characters who are around Donald Trump None of them have exactly a sterling record of telling the truth.
Right.
But I got to believe that the special prosecutor has more details to come.
Jerry Nadler, the congressman from New York, who's likely going to be the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, he said on Friday, quote, "It's become very clear that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians." Now, he meant that not necessarily about conspiracy to affect the election, but collusion in a broader sense, having to do with business deals, having to do with whatever. Do you agree? Is there evidence of that?
Again, I'm going to continue the same position I've had from the beginning of this investigation, why we've kept it bipartisan. Both Chairman Burr and I are going to reserve that final judgment until we get all our facts. We still need to see people like Michael Cohen back before our committee. But we do know this. It's pretty clear that the Russians, not only had they hacked into the emails, not only had they stolen other information, but they were very forward-leaning in terms of offering this information to the Trump campaign. And it appears that a number of the senior Trump officials or Trump campaign officials continued to lie about those kind of contacts.
So, like I said before I showed the clip, that's Senator Mark Warner basically laying out all the evidence of collusion, and there's so much evidence of collusion. If you, I mean, that's why 2 weeks ago, the title of my Sunday clip roundup was Trump Trapped. And then last week it was Trump Tide Turns. And this week it's Trump Collusion, because it's just building and building. And the Michael Cohen plea is just the latest piece of evidence. And I think Mark Warner laid out the leverage argument that I was talking about before that clip pretty clearly. And Margaret Brennan also got pretty much the same answer. Started off with kind of a softball question and then took sort of the opposite tack as Jake Tapper in that last clip. And instead of like trying to get more and more evidence of collusion, Margaret Brennan sort of took the devil's advocate position. Or sometimes I think CBS and Face the Nation are sort of like Fox News Light, and they are taking more of a conservative position than the rest of the media for some reason or another. You can let me know what you think after we watch this clip. Margaret Brennan basically takes, the Trump position that, I mean, I guess Jake Tapper did the legal and cool question was, I'm sorry, that was Chuck Todd talking to Adam Schiff. That was sort of taking the Trump position, but I think Margaret Brennan does it a little more seriously in the 2-minute, 11-second clip from Face the Nation. Also, Mark Warner giving pretty much the same answer. I'm just contrasting the questioning of the two Sunday morning news analysis show anchors from the corporate media, which I will discuss a little more with you after we watch that final Mark Warner clip from the Sunday morning shows this morning here.
I want to get to your role right now on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where you are the ranking member. This week, we heard that the president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, pled guilty to lying to Congress about financial interests, specifically a building in Moscow that the Trump organization was seeking to build during the campaign. And that was reportedly discovered after the special counsel came and asked your committee for a transcript of what Michael Cohen had said. What does all of this signal to you?
Well, it signals, one, that if you lie to Congress, and I was with our chairman, Chairman Burr, on Friday, where he said, if you lie to Congress, we're going to go after you. We're going to make sure that gets referred. And we've made a number of referrals.
It's rare to go forward with the prosecution.
And we've made a number of referrals. But I think what it also says is that Donald Trump, as a candidate, said no dealings with Russia. I think if I'd been a Republican delegate going into the summer of 2016, I think it would have been a relevant fact to know that actually Donald Trump was still trying to do business with the Russian government. Maybe that's why he was so reluctant to say anything bad about Vladimir Putin. What we also know at this point is not only were this ongoing business deals, but you had the president's son and his son-in-law meeting with Russians. We had the president's campaign aides being aware that there were the Hillary Clinton emails. We had the president's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, offering to brief Russian agents. There seems to be all of these paths lead to ties with Russia, and Mr. Trump continues to deny any of that.
Well, the president is essentially saying seeking a profit is not a crime, right? And separating out this allegation of collusion with Russian intelligence versus his organization's business interests.
But Margaret, what I'd say is we can debate whether it's a crime or not, But he was, during that period, was denying any ties to Russia. And I do think it would have been a relevant factor, frankly, for Republican delegates to know that during that time period when he was saying only good things about Vladimir Putin, as a candidate for president, he was still trying to do business with that very same government.
Do you know that candidate Trump knew?
So you can let me know what you think down in the comment section about the different questioning styles of Margaret Brennan versus Jake Tapper, getting basically the same answer from Senator Mark Warner, more succinctly, I guess, on CBS's Face the Nation. Usually I don't show the same answer twice, but it lets you sort of compare and contrast how Mark Warner delivered the same talking points. He had like two important points there, I guess. One is that Republican voters had a right to know that Trump was going soft on Russia because he had business interests with Russia. And the second is that even whether or not Trump committed crimes by lying to the American people about his business interests with Russia, it was a form of compromising material, leverage that the Russians have gained over Trump because they know he lied to the American people, and they could have released that information, harming Trump. Although, I don't know, Trump lies to the American people like every single day. So you could also argue, what's the harm to Trump that Russia releases that? In fact, Trump is saying he's like totally switched his story already after the Cohen plea deal that, or the Cohen pleading guilty to lying to Congress about how long the Trump Tower deal lasted. Trump kept saying no business dealings with Russia during the campaign. Now he's saying, well, Cohen's lying, and even if he's telling the truth, there's nothing wrong. It's totally legal and cool. So I think he's trying to have all sides of all. It's pretty transparent, I think, what's going on. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section, and you can tell me also what you think about the different questioning styles of Jake Tapper and Margaret Brennan with Mark Warner there. I have one more Democrat, and before I get to a few Republicans talking about the collusion story as it developed this week. The next two clips are both from NBC's Meet the Press. First is Jerry Nadler, like I showed I showed the news summary from Meet the Press near the beginning of the show that came right before Chuck Todd asked Jerry Nadler about the Michael Cohen plea deal. And as I mentioned before, Jerry Nadler is the incoming chair of the House Judiciary Committee, meaning he will be the Democrat in charge of impeachment. I was reading the live comments earlier, and someone was saying, what do you expect Democrats to do about impeachment? It's the Senate that has to vote on impeachment. Actually, the House, it requires a majority vote of the House to impeach the president, but impeachment is like an indictment. It just charges the president with violation, high crimes and misdemeanors. Then it goes to the Senate, where there's a trial, and it takes 2/3, 67 senators, and since there are going to be, 53 senators, 53 Republican senators, that means you have to get all 47 of the Democrats and independents who caucus with the Democrats. Angus King and Bernie Sanders are actually independents, but they caucus with the Democrats. So that's your 47, and then you need 20 Republicans to vote to remove Donald Trump, which means the Mueller report would have to be so bad that they all say President Mike Pence is the best we can do. And so you can let me know what you think down in the comment section about that, and I'll show you John Barrasso's response in just a minute when he talks to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. But first, here's Jerry Nadler, and he's reacting to the implications of the Cohen plea, starting off with a quote from The Atlantic saying that this is basically obstruction of justice, and he makes some of the same points you heard from Senator Mark Warner. I'll discuss what Jerry Nadler said to Chuck Todd after we watch that 2-minute, 13-second clip together over here.
I want to start with Michael Cohen. He pled guilty to lying to Congress about the Trump Organization's effort to build a Trump Tower in Moscow back in 2015, 2016. This was happening at the same time that Donald Trump was running for president. Here's what a former federal prosecutor, Ken White, observed in The Atlantic, and I'm curious if you agree. This conclusion, at least, is inescapable. The president, who has followed this drama obsessively, knew that his personal lawyer was lying to Congress about his business activities and stood by while it happened. Do you agree with that assessment? And does that look like obstruction of justice to you?
Well, I do agree with that assessment. And, you know, we have a president who lies incessantly to the American people about big matters and small matters, who surrounds himself with people who lie incessantly to the American people. And the key fact now is that the time when he can get away with lying to the American people all the time and evading accountability is coming to an end. And I do think that this is a very serious matter. And among other things, the fact that he was lying to the American people about doing business in Russia and that the Kremlin knew he was lying gave the Kremlin a hold over him. And one question we have now is, does the Kremlin still have holds over him because of other lies that they know about?
So the fact that the Kremlin, which overnight has confirmed that there were some emails and a phone call between the Trump organization and the Kremlin, and we only find out about it now, you believe that that is proof that there might be leverage?
There certainly was leverage during the campaign period and until recently, because they knew that he was lying. They knew that he had major business dealings, or that Cohen on his behalf had major business dealings in Moscow during the campaign, and that he was lying about that. There may be other things that they know that give them leverage. One question has always been, why was the president so obsequious to Putin from the beginning of the campaign up to the present day? And it may be that it's because the Kremlin has leverage over the president, which is a terrible thing if true.
Michael.
A terrible thing if true, and like I said, Jerry Nadler making some of the same points you heard from Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. One thing I wanted to point out, in addition to the commentary I made before I showed the clip, and sometimes I think I give too much commentary before and then repeat it after the clip, like I repeat myself. So I repeat myself when I'm under stress. I repeat myself when I'm under stress. Sorry, that's a King Crimson reference, but it's a very stressful presidency, so you have to forgive me if I repeat myself every now and then. But Jerry Nadler kind of repeated some of the points from Mark Warner. But one thing that I didn't mention before I showed that clip, and that I didn't hear mentioned anywhere else on any of the Sunday morning news analysis shows, was what Chuck Todd said in his questioning of Jerry Nadler there, that Russia had confirmed Michael Cohen's story, the communication between Michael Cohen and the Kremlin, confirmed by Vladimir Putin. I didn't hear that on any of the other news analysis shows. And it actually emphasizes what's really an important point about the whole Russia scandal. If you watch the Saturday Night Live clip I showed at the beginning, it seems like Vladimir Putin and Trump were like best buddies, and then they do this thing like, oh, I prefer presidents who weren't indicted, which I said was a good joke, but it also it reminds us of something about Russian interest here isn't to support Donald Trump, it's to undermine the United States. So it could be in Russia's interest to help get Trump elected, and then actually to help get him impeached or to undermine his administration. I mean, he is the president now, and so undermining Trump is actually a positive thing for Putin, possibly. So that shouldn't be surprising, and I just wanted to bring that up as an additional point, since Chuck Todd was the only of the Big Five corporate outlet anchors to mention this breaking news that Russia has confirmed the Michael Cohen plea story that he was communicating with the Kremlin. So, like I said, Jerry Nadler was the last of the Democrats, except for the final clip when I, as I promised earlier, have Adam Schiff give his rebuttal to the long tirade of bullshit from Roger Stone that is the second to last clip. And he's the final of the Republicans. First it's going to be John Barrasso, then Roy Blunt of Missouri, and then Roger Stone are my three Republicans. And John Barrasso is showing why it is very much of a long shot. If you check your Constitution, here's my ACLU Constitution that I give out to people who donate $10 to me on the PayPal link down in the video description, or $10 a month at the link down in the video description to my Patreon account. You become a $10 a month patron there, and in either case, you have to give me a shipping address. I will send you this Constitution. And wait, where's my LiberalViewer hashtag liberal? I had a hashtag LiberalViewer sticker here, and it's fallen. My sticker's fallen, and I can't get. Oh, here it is. Here. See, I can. If at the $5 level you get just this, at the $10 level you get both of these. And if you check your Constitution, it takes the 67 senators, like I said, which means the 47 Democrats and 20 Republicans to remove a president. Well, John Barrasso shows why he is not ready to be one of those 20 Republicans, and he has some talking points to, well, he was an international businessman doing international business. I don't know if that assuages my feelings of collusion or the whole thing about the leverage the Russians had over him, or the points that Mark Warner made about Republicans had a right to know when they were voting on the various Republican candidates that Trump was basically trying to get this deal with the Kremlin while lying about it. Anyway, here's John Barrasso dealing with that in a way that makes me think he, like I said, is not ready to remove Trump from office. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section after you watch that almost 2-minute clip together over here.
I want to ask you quickly on the revelation from the Kremlin over the weekend, confirming Michael Cohen's account, essentially, that yes, there were some interactions between Donald Trump's organization and the Kremlin. We don't find out about it until now. Do you have any concerns at all that if the Russians knew, basically we now know they might have had leverage over this president? They knew information that we in the public did not know. They confirm it over the weekend. Is that not cause for concern?
The president is an international businessman. I'm not surprised he was doing international business. Cohen is in trouble for lying to Congress, not anything related to the campaign or Russian influence, but we have a Mueller investigation going on. We need to come to completion on that, and it should be done quickly. I know there are members.
Is it fair to the Republican voters of 2016 that they did not know that the president was at least negotiating a business deal with Putin?
There were so many things involved in the 2016 campaign. It's hard to point to what one thing influenced voters. I think people were thinking it is time for a change. They didn't want Hillary Clinton. They wanted a new opportunity. And they've gotten it in terms of a strong and healthy and growing economy. Jobs are up. Wages are up. Consumer confidence is at an all-time high. I think people look back where they were 2 years ago and where we are today. We're in a much better place.
All right, but should a good economy trump the concern that we didn't know about this stuff?
Well, I want the Mueller probe to end, and I want the American people to see what is in it. There are people that are trying to do legislation on that. They've been crying wolf for 2 years that Mueller is going to be fired. Didn't happen, not going to happen. This is wasted energy to try to do this. And for the previous guest to say maybe we should not fund the government over protecting special counsel Mueller, I think is the wrong way to go.
And I didn't show where Jerry Nadler was talking about wanting to protect Robert Mueller and possibly defunding the government, but you saw John Barrasso thought that was ridiculous because Trump's never going to do anything. And maybe he's right. Maybe if he gets that much support and gets the alternative universe of Trump TV, Fox News, that I'm going to show in just a minute. But I think that might be some kind of constraint on Donald Trump, that he has to keep people like John Barrasso. I wanted to show one of my frequent Super Chat contributors, Sexy Bob, posted a question with... So the $5 contribution earlier with the question if there's going to be a pardon for Manafort. And, there has been some reporting about that. That's all very speculative. And, of course, it's possible. There are a couple things that constrain it. One is that Paul Manafort, in his original plea deal, pled guilty to crimes in, I think, 3 different states. It was like Virginia, California, and it was either New York or New Jersey. I can't remember. So he could immediately be prosecuted for state crimes, and the president can only pardon him for federal crimes. So that's one constraint on Trump pardoning Manafort. And the other constraint is that it could have Republicans like Senator John Barrasso, who seems like he's willing to support Trump with the evidence so far. That's the kind of thing that could lose him Republican senators, that's the only other real constraint on him. Might lose him 20 Republican senators so that he could actually be removed from office, in addition to the majority vote in the House that could impeach him. And anyway, like I said before, I went off on answering Sexy Bob's question about the Paul Manafort pardon. The next clip I'm going to show is from Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace, he asked both Roy Blunt, the Republican, and then Ben Cardin, the Democratic senator, the same basic question. In the introduction to the show, they never mentioned anything about the Mueller probe or the Michael Cohen plea. It was all about the death of George H.W. Bush, and then the G20 summit, and then the breaking news that there's been like a 90-day suspension of the trade war between the United States and China. And so Fox News Sunday, like I said, never mentioned Michael Cohen. And the only way they mentioned the issue at all was in this weird question Chris Wallace asks of Roy Blunt, and then, like I said, in a Ben Cardin clip I'm not going to show, where, like, is the Mueller probe hurting Trump's ability to deal with Russia? And hasn't it been going on a really long time? And Roy Blunt, actually, to his credit, says something that Mark Warner said earlier that's, well, one thing it shows is don't lie to Congress, but they never really get into the whole Trump Tower aspect at all on Fox News Sunday. Never came up. So maybe that's good news for Trump that even though they have to sort of talk about it, they don't really give the details to people to, like, upset them so that Trump loses support amongst Republicans, so that he loses those 20 Republican senators he needs to keep on his side so that he isn't removed from office after possibly getting impeached by the House, which I will discuss with you a little more after we watch that Fox News Sunday clip together with that very bogus Chris Wallace Fox News bias question over here.
Senator, President Trump also canceled his meeting with Vladimir Putin at the G20, he said, because of Russian aggression against Ukraine. But the Russians, a spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry, suggested that the main reason, the real reason, may be because of President Trump's domestic political problems, including new revelations from the special counsel. Two questions about that. Do you think that the special counsel's investigation has cast a cloud and made it more difficult for President Trump to do business on the world stage? And what do you think of the fact, because this is not the first time that Robert Mueller has announced some action just as the president was headed out on a foreign trip?
Well, I haven't thought a lot about the Mueller timing here. I certainly do think that lying to the Intelligence Committee that I'm part of is a big mistake for whoever does it, and creates lots of problems for the committee itself. When you lie to a congressional committee, when you lie to in an investigation where hundreds and thousands of man hours, people hours are being spent, the question you ask the next witness may be different. A witness you don't call may be somebody you would have called if you'd gotten the right answer. I'm glad to see the special prosecutor taking that particular crime seriously. But on the Russian front, I hope if the president did have any words to exchange with President Putin, it was outrage about what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. It is totally unacceptable. Right. The president, I think, announced that he wasn't going to have that meeting pretty quickly after what happened in Ukraine, as opposed to in response to anything else. And if the president had a chance to talk to President Putin, I hope his talk was very frank and no holds barred, that we are not going to accept the kind of activity that the Russians are looking at in Ukraine and Crimea, and to better send a strong message about the rest of Eastern Europe.
Senator Blunt, thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be with you.
Always good to talk with you, sir.
That wasn't even the only Fox News bias. They kept talking about how they were coming from the Reagan Library, and this is the plane that the 40th president used to travel around the world searching for peace, or whatever. It was the hagiography that is going on of, Reagan on on Fox News. That has like been going on for a really long time. Even with George H.W. Bush, I don't know. There were some people who talked about his flaws, some of the pundits, but not on most of the places. Compared to Donald Trump, he looks pretty good these days, but that's a pretty low bar. But like I said, I'm not getting into all that. I'm not covering the George H.W. Bush death and funeral. When someone who's 94 dies, news? Is it news? I mean, it's a moment to go back and do find a whole bunch of old clips that I don't know. In some ways, it's interesting to watch. I remember I lived through those days, but that's not my topic today. And like I said, that was the alternative universe of Fox News Sunday. Welcome back from the alternative universe where the Mueller probe has been going on for way too long, since May 2017, $30 million. I think you'll hear Roger Stone say that in the next clip. $30 million in the Mueller probe. That's like way too much. And maybe it's hurting our great president's ability to conduct foreign policy. Have you thought about that? What about this weird timing that... And so I don't know. Does that seem too solicitous of the Trump position? That it is a justification for referring to Fox News as Trump TV? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. Like I said, the name Michael Cohen never spoken on Fox News Sunday this morning. I don't know. I was in kind of a rush to put the show together today. Maybe I missed it. There's a link down in the video description. You can tell me if you can find. I will send a free Constitution and sticker to anyone who can find mention of Michael Cohen on Fox News Sunday this morning, because I did not hear it. But I am now going to get to the final two clips that I've talked about multiple times. The first one is the last Republican, Roger Stone, longtime dirty trickster, longtime associate of Paul Manafort, friend of Donald Trump, who was fired from the campaign and then went into doing some weird subterranean thing. And the questions about the big question is, was he the conduit between WikiLeaks and Donald Trump, since he was close to Donald Trump and apparently had some communication with at least some sort of representative from WikiLeaks? Well, he denies all that. And this is the 5.5-minute clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos that I promised you earlier. Roger Stone, and it starts off with a clip from October that George Stephanopoulos uses in his introduction. I mentioned earlier that Roger Stone said all he's guilty of is, unless spreading bullshit is a crime, he's not guilty of anything. That's the introductory clip you're about to see. And then there's a long back and forth where I think George Stephanopoulos does a good job of laying out some of the emails that came out from the broken down plea negotiations between Robert Mueller and Jerome Corsi, an associate of Roger Stone's. And I guess that's enough of an introduction. I will talk about this 5.5-minute clip a little more after. Is there an edit in here? I'm not sure I edited this at all. I think it just might be 5.5 minutes from the interview of Roger Stone that George Stephanopoulos did this morning. Over here.
Wherever you are.
I will be charged in any crime that relates to Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration. I'm certainly guilty of bluffing and posturing and punking the Democrats. Unless they pass some law against bull and I missed it, I'm engaging in tradecraft. It's politics.
That was Roger Stone back in October, but since then, a series of reports suggest he may be the next target of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. There you see the headlines right there. ABC, Robert Mueller appears laser focused on Roger Stone. Wall Street Journal, Mueller bores into Trump advisor Roger Stone's ties to WikiLeaks. The Washington Post, Trump's night owl phone calls Roger Stone draw scrutiny. New York Times, Roger Stone sought WikiLeaks plans amid 2016 campaign. Roger Stone is here with us right now. Welcome to This Week. It does appear that Robert Mueller is developing a case that you were a key part of this whole Russia investigation. Russia funnels the hacked emails to WikiLeaks. You're the conduit between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign. Are you still confident you won't be indicted?
Well, none of that is true, of course, and there's no evidence to support that supposition. It is now 2 years in, $30 million. I think few Americans could withstand the kind of legal proctological examination that Mr. Mueller has put me under. According to the New York Times, I was under surveillance by the Obama administration in 2016. They wrote that on January 20th, 2017. And today, there is still no evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion between the Russian state and the Trump campaign involving WikiLeaks or not involving WikiLeaks.
You say no evidence, but I want to just put up, we know that Mueller has talked to about a dozen of your associates. We know he's asked President Trump about your contacts, and we want to show some of the evidence that has just come out and then have you respond to it. It's July 25th. 2016 email from you to Jerome Corsi where you say, get to Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy in London and get the pending WikiLeaks email. You have another July 31st email to Corsi where you talk about a British man named Ted Malloch, and you say Malloch, you tell him, should go see Assange. Corsi emails back to you on August 2nd. Word is our friend in the embassy, that must be Assange, plans 2 more dumps, one shortly after I'm back, second in October. Impact planned to be very damaging. You had another email to another associate of yours, Sam Nunberg, on August 4th. I dined with my new pal, Julian Assange, last night. And then on August 8th, you actually said this to a group of Republicans down in Florida.
I actually have communicated with Assange. I believe the next tranche of his documents pertain to the Clinton Foundation.
But now you say you never communicated with Assange at all, despite all of that documentary evidence at the time.
Well, first of all, let's take them backwards. I clarified that last one a dozen times. I identified that I had a source, a progressive New York City radio host, who told me in late July that whatever WikiLeaks had, whatever Assange had alluded to quite openly on CNN in June and again on Fox in August, was devastating, was a bombshell, and that it would come in October. I identified that source. I was ridiculed in the media repeatedly. Last week, I produced text messages that prove indisputably that he was my source and that his source was a woman attorney working for WikiLeaks. You won't find that in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. Let's go back to those emails because I think they're mischaracterized and they need some context. The same day I got an email that was forwarded to me from James Rosen of Fox News saying that he'd had a tip that the WikiLeaks disclosures pertained to the Clinton Foundation. Yes, I contacted Jerry Corsi because at some point Ted Malloch, who I'd met once, had dropped Assange's name. And like every politico in America, like every political reporter, I was interested in knowing what exactly they had. But there was no response to that. I mean, if I send you an email saying, George, you should rob a bank, but you don't rob a bank, neither one of us are guilty of robbing.
So you're saying you never spoke with Julian Assange, never contacted WikiLeaks, never spoke about any of that to President Trump?
That is absolutely correct. I turned over one direct message to the House Intelligence Committee between the flack for WikiLeaks and I, in which he essentially brushed me off. That immediately leaked to Atlantic Magazine, who then edited the context and published it. Now, I had no contact with Assange. Assange himself has said, while Roger Stone is a brilliant spin master, we've had no communication with him whatsoever.
And if Robert Mueller develops evidence, says that he can show that you did talk to WikiLeaks, did communicate with WikiLeaks, and then did communicate with President Trump?
That's all speculation, George. There is no such evidence. And in fact, going back to the email, I think those have been mischaracterized. Saying that these dumps are coming turns out to be completely incorrect. They don't come in early August as predicted by Mr. Corsi. And there's no reference in that email to John Podesta's emails either. It simply says Podesta will be exposed to the American people, whatever that means. It's not as if those things had not been widely published in early August.
Have you had any contact with Robert?
So what do you think? Did you buy all that? Or, like me, do you believe if bullshit were a crime, Roger Stone would be going to jail and he may have actually been lying in situations where he could be going to jail? In fact, what are the odds that Roger Stone is going to end up in jail? I think they're pretty high. And I don't know. Did you see him when George Stephanopoulos was reading the emails that came out in the Jerome Corsi broken down plea deal revelations, where actually Jerome Corsi, I cannot figure out why. It makes no sense. Maybe he's just not a rational actor, but he released the evidence against him that was going to be in his plea agreement that he didn't make. What he thinks is the benefit of that. As a former criminal defense attorney, I can't figure it out. You can let me know if you can figure it out down in the comment section. But did you see how Roger Stone, when he was listening to George Stephanopoulos read those emails, he was doing, I don't know, did he have dentures? He was sucking his dentures or some weird thing. He was there was some weird thing where he was sucking his teeth, which, I don't know, is that a tell? Is that if you played poker with Roger Stone, is that how you know he's stressed out, or he's excited about his hand, or he thinks he's about to lose a big pot, or I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But the one other clip I promised you, the final news clip before I get to my bonus Dash and Sandy clip, where I've been trying to find evidence of puppy and kitten collusion between Sandy and Dash. And I tried again today. I got the brief interaction, but I didn't really document the puppy-kitten collusion I was looking for. That'll be the actual final clip. But this is the final news clip where George Stephanopoulos gives Representative Adam Schiff, the incoming chair of the House Intelligence Committee, a chance to rebut all that bullshit you just heard from Roger Stone. And it's only 90 seconds long, but I think it's worth listening to if you were drawn in by the Roger Stone bullshit. Here is the Adam Schiff rebuttal, the final news clip for tonight that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Your response to Roger Stone there, you say he's denying any contact with the WikiLeaks, any contact with the Trump campaign over WikiLeaks. Did you find his answers credible?
No, I didn't, not at all. And in fact, the emails that you read to him, those exchanges with Corsi, which I think he provided to the press, the substance of those emails are inconsistent with his testimony before our committee. The mere existence of those emails are inconsistent with his testimony before our committee. But nonetheless, his testimony was delivered with the same conviction that he made his statements to you this morning. That testimony really needs to be provided to the special counsel for consideration of whether perjury charges are warranted. So, no, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in what you heard this morning.
So you're saying, based on what he told your committee, that setting aside the underlying question of whether or not he was a conduit between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign, you believe he's vulnerable to charges of lying to Congress?
I do. And what's more, if the allegations in that criminal information, the draft information that Mr. Corsi, I guess, was considering pleading to, if the substance of those allegations, and Mr. Corsi has only denied trying to mislead the special counsel, he hasn't denied having those conversations with Roger Stone. If that substance is correct, it also looks like Mr. Stone was attempting to enlist Mr. Corsi's help in covering for false testimony. So I think the testimony alone is a reason for great exposure for Mr. Stone.
So, yeah, like I was saying before, I showed that clip. I think there's a good chance Roger Stone's going to jail, and that's the exposure of Roger Stone that Adam Schiff was explaining in that rebuttal. That's sort of as I showed an Adam Schiff clip earlier, and that was the part that I cut out and promised to show later. And now you've seen all the news clips. If you like the clips I picked out for you, please give me a thumbs up down below there. Give me a supportive comment, or of course you can support me. I have a bunch of super chat contributors already. I showed one. Here's the rest of the super chat contributors so far. Thank you, Mary Wani, Nelson 100, and Sexy Bob. I'm about to finish up the show, so if you want to give a super chat contribution, this is your last chance. Although, like I said before, you can give me contributions through PayPal and Patreon at links I put down in the video description. Thumbs up helps me out, just that, or comments help me out, sharing me on social media if you like my media analysis and my media criticism and political analysis. Now, I did promise the bonus Sandy and Dash clip for the Sandy and Dash fans. This is, I try to find puppy kitten collusion. This clip shows a brief interaction, but I swear sometimes they're whispering together. And now this is from before the show, because as I showed last week, Dash like hides over there in the corner, and I got Dash to come out while Sandy was coming in. Right now, actually, Sandy is right over there. Oh, she woke up. But here's a picture I took during the last clip of Sandy actually sleeping during the show. That's just Sandy. Here's the brief interaction between Sandy and Dash right outside my broadcast studio. And I couldn't catch them whispering together, so there's no real puppy-kitten collusion evidence. But I swear sometimes they do, but it's not in this clip. But they do have some brief interaction you can see here. So that's the bonus Sandy and Dash clip. I hope you enjoyed all the clips I picked out. The 8 or 9 hours I spent today watching the Sunday morning news analysis programs and Saturday Night Live and picking out the best clips for you and putting it together under this topic and adding my media criticism and political analysis. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe to my channel, support my channel in all the ways I already talked about. And this week, last week I talked about maybe doing a shorter edited produced video out of last week's video, but I got all involved in a bunch of ACLU related stuff. And this Tuesday, I'm actually involved in this police transparency accountability project. I'll probably upload a video of my 2-minute statement before the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors this Tuesday afternoon. But if you want to know what it's all about, or if you want to help me out, does anyone know how to pronounce Latin? Because I'm going to be using a Latin phrase. It's ubi ius ibi remedium. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, it means there's no right without a remedy. And if you know how to pronounce Latin, and I'm not pronouncing that correctly, maybe you can explain to me how to pronounce it correctly, because that's the first thing I'm going to say to my Sacramento County Board of Supervisors this Tuesday when I'm trying to get sheriff transparency and accountability, something I've been working on for quite a long time. And anyway, you'll see that maybe uploaded on the channel Tuesday or Wednesday. And then until next week, or until I have some other reason to make an edited produced video or some other live stream, I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday for the foreseeable future doing my Sunday live clip roundup. Looks like I might be around to cover the Trump impeachment, and I guess until next week or until I upload my next video, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.